So thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to run through our P6-Scrubber. I'm Nicole Jardin. I'm coming to you from Calgary, snowy Calgary. We got about 8 inches of snow, I think, today. I'm the founder and CEO of Emerald, and Sue is joining us from Wyoming, and she's an implementation specialist here with Emerald, and she will show you the tool in action. So let's talk about why we built the Scrubber tool. Okay, so what we found was we had a lot of common struggles with different clients. One in particular is keeping your P6 database clean. And so what causes these issues usually is a lot of importing. Okay, so I'm going to ask a quick question. How do you deal with P6 projects from outside your company? So depending on your role, you may have lots of different players participating in your projects that are giving you P6 files. So if you want to answer the poll, I'll share the results. Okay, so we found that we have clients who get a P6 file. It's usually an XER, but it could be an XML. And you don't always want all the data to come into your P6 for a variety of reasons. And we'll touch on those when Sue does the demo. So I'll go ahead and share the results. So we have people who will open the XER and modify it, which is a big no-no, guys. You're not supposed to do that. We had one client who did that, and they messed up some of the names of key fields, and it screwed up the whole database. So that you got to be a bit careful for that. We have clients who scrub it in a different database, so they carry a second database just to clean these things up. And that has a cost with it, associated with it. So, and then importing and cleaning them up in the same database, maybe in a different EPS, do a cleanup and bring it in. But bottom line is that can be quite time consuming, okay? So we built P6-Scrubber to help make that a lot easier, a lot more seamless, and a lot less error prone. That's really why we did that. And it will allow you to import and clean up XERs, XMLs, as well as Microsoft Project XMLs as well. So it does all three of those. So the idea is we want to keep our system from being polluted. We don't want a bunch of extra stuff in our P6 database for a bunch of reasons. For example, you could have overwriting taking place, which can be dangerous, especially if it's things like calendar. You could also have things colliding. Okay, so you could have two calendars that are named the same, but they don't have the same data in it. So these are some of the reasons why you don't want to. You got to be a bit more careful with what you're dealing with on importing. We also have various clients who have a lot of specifications, specific things that they want to see the contractors have in their P6 files. So they want it to control that and make sure that's all that was coming into the database. So if any of you do reporting out through third-party tools like Power BI or Tableau, you want to make sure everything's nice and clean and you don't have to worry about whether something got collided from someone's import. So I'm going to ask one other quick question. How much time do you spend cleaning up your database? So I'll just ask. Now, this is going to depend. It's all over the map, depending on what you do in P6. So we have some clients that have over 50 to 100 projects that they bring in every week or every 2 weeks, at minimum every 1 month. So it really depends on your particulars, how much time you spend doing that and how complicated those projects are. Okay, so we got a few votes. I'll share those. And it's important to have a way to do this nice, tidy, with no stress. Okay, and this is why we built P6-Scrubber. P6-Scrubber. Too many tools. P6-Scrubber. So let me tell you how it works. So Sue's going to show it to you, but the way that it works is you have a file that you get, or it could be more than one file. It could have one project or more than one project. You grab that file and you select it, and you have a definition set up. the definition of what you want scrubbed. Now, it's going to scrub the POBS and RIS types. So some of you may be experiencing these big, huge files over the last few years with these straggler data elements. I think Oracle's got those under control now. So more and more, if you're on newer versions, that should be less of an issue. But it does take care of those straggler problems. You can check calendars, which is a biggie. You want to make sure your calendars don't collide and blow up somebody else's calendar, which could ripple into their schedule. You'll be able to check and clean, rename, etc., UDFs and codes and cost accounts. And that will be at all levels, okay? And then we've got additional validations, things like project IDs. Are they matching your standard project names, things like that? So let's turn it over to Sue, and we'll let her show it to us in detail. And again, as she goes through, if you have any questions, ask them. And if I can't answer them in the question area, we'll get Sue to show you live in the tool.
Okay, so I am going to share my screen here. And first of all, what I'm going to show you is what happens when you have a database that you don't scrub files in to begin with. First of all, I'm on the resources window here. And I can see that down here at my bottom piece here, I have a bunch of kind of straggler resources that have been imported in that didn't have anything of any type of file structure that went on with it. So they just come in at the bottom of your resource dictionary. P6-Scrubber will help you land those into the proper hierarchy that you want to put them into. Another is that Nicole talked about calendars. And you can see that in this database, we've had a whole lot of calendars that have been imported. We have some that are almost duplicates, some that have different prefixes on them, things like that. And these aren't necessarily calendars that you want to have especially in your global area, because look at how many calendars we have here, because they were imported in with other with XERs or XMLs. So to keep this nice and tidy, we have an option that we can roll these down to the project level, keeping our own global calendars kind of nice and tidy and meaningful to our organization. Another thing that we see a lot is that just about everyone has kind of a standard 5-day work week. There is one that is delivered with P6 when you get it. And if another organization has altered that calendar in any manner, that will overwrite the definition that you have for that calendar, which could then in turn impact your, if it's different, of course, it could impact your schedules when you schedule them. So you want to avoid that overwriting of that particular calendar if you do have a duplicate name in there. Another thing that we see is that in activity codes, you can see here that I'm just going to sort these, is that we've had some global activity codes that have come in that have some prefixes and things on there. And these aren't necessarily codes that we use. These actually came in from another organization. We do have the ability to push those down also to the project level, just to keep your own global activity codes nice and tidy for your organization. So they're meaningful and you don't have a lot of noise in there. Another piece that tends to get a little messy is when you are coming in and you're importing a calendar, or let's say an XER. You have some options on an XER to bring in that kind of information by your, let's do a couple of these, just ignore a couple of these. Oh, and then I need to, geez, just going to go test, see what we've got. Okay. Sorry about that. I wasn't prepared. So in our default, or when we have our update options, we don't have the option to handle our resource or our codes, our activity codes or anything like that on rolling them down. We can overwrite them, we can do other things with them, but we can't actually control rolling them down. So you can't say that you don't want them to come in. So that is another option that we run into, is that we don't have that, even that functionality in P6 when we're importing. So I'm just going to get out of here and I'm going to get into my database that I actually show my information in. And while that's logging in, then we can talk about P6 Loader or P6-Scrubber. See, I did the same thing.
Yeah, I jinxed you.
You did. So with P6-Scrubber, we have two versions that we can deploy. One is a live version, which is connected to your database, which we find the most helpful way to deploy it. But we can also deploy it where you don't have it connected to a database. We find the advantage to connecting to the database is that you can see the information that actually exists in your database right now. So when we do that, you can actually point it to several different databases. So you can compare to whatever database you are, if you have more than one, that you're importing into. So I'm going to go ahead and log in and just give you kind of a general overview of what we have here. So we have our different modules that handle different topics in each one of our files. We have codes, so we're able to look at the dictionary validations and the code types there. We have user-defined fields, and we have those for each level that we want to work with. Now, if I were building this out from scratch, let's say I'm not necessarily connected to P6, but I want to build out a definition just from the ground up. What I can do is, first of all, you want to enable this module so that P6-Scrubber knows you want to take a look at that data. The next is I can start adding information, like for my code types. So let's say I want to put a code type name in here, and that is vendor. I want to give it a scope. If it were a project level, I would put the project code in there, of course. And then I can choose what to do with that. And in this case, I want to keep it. And then if I am hooked up to P6, I can actually go in and I can take a look and see if I have a matching code in there. Now, in addition to that, I can define my dictionary for this particular activity code here. So if I go into P6, let's say I want to populate this with all my values in P6. What I can do is I can do a copy and paste. So I would go into my P6 here, and I would go and I'm going to look at my vendor, of course, and I want to see all my values. And what I can do is I can take and I can copy these values, and I can go back to P6-Scrubber and use a bulk edit here. Then I can paste that in here, and it's going to give me all of my columns. Well, I don't need this color column here, so I can X that out. And then I can bring it in and apply it, and I have my values here. I have the same option with these is to select whether I want to keep them or whether I wanted to scrub them or remove them. And then I would do the matching value as well if I was connected to P6. If not, I don't need to do that. If I wanted to add them individually, I would just use this plus sign here to add them, and it's going to add a blank line. Now, in our user-defined fields, we have, our different subject areas depending on which area we're in, whether it's activities or project. Excuse me. So we were able to handle each one of those levels as well. Now, it's all fine and good to create a definition from scratch, but what might be easier, and in my case, I find that most of the time this is easier, is that first of all, I'm going to blank out my definition so that I don't have anything in there. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to browse and I'm going to import the file that I actually want to handle. So let's say I have this file from a contractor that I want to scrub, and I'm going to get multiple files from this particular contractor. I can go ahead and I can import that particular XER in this case. It could be an XML as well. And once I apply it, it's going to come in and it's going to start showing me what's in that file. So in my project codes, of course, I want to enable. I can see that I have some problems with my district. However, I have a green check mark here that says that it actually matches in P6. So when I hover over it, it's going to kind of coach me. Where am I seeing problems with it? What's not matching at this point? So I can see that I have a dictionary validation that failed on this. So I can go in, I can open up my dictionary, and it's going to show me that in this particular XER, I have District 5 or DIST 5 and as District 5. However, if I click in here and I blank that out, and then I go down, I can see that I have a D5. So actually my District 5 has a value of D5. So I can remap that to the dictionary value that I actually have. So that's going to help me go along and make sure that I keep all of my dictionaries clean. I can also choose on either the code type or the code values whether I wanted to scrub anything additional that came in. Maybe I don't want any more values allowed to come in with that, and so it would remove them. Or maybe I don't want that particular code type that is not defined down in my table here. I'm just going to close this down. So anything that I had in these, what I could do is I could decide if I don't have a client type, or I don't want this client type to come in, I could say I want to scrub it. But if any other code came in other than these 4, it would remove them if I have this check marked. Now, in the way of user-defined fields, let's go down and let's just take a look at our activity ones. I can choose on these ones which level I want to come in. So on here, actually, let me go into my other UDFs at my project level because I have some that aren't there. So let's say I don't use WBS project codes. I can handle this one, and I can say I want to scrub that out. However, I don't want any other WBS codes to come in. I would check mark that. And so anytime another WBS level UDF came in, it would remove it. Now, on my submittal date here, it's telling me that it doesn't have a match in P6. However, there's something very close to it. That's what this light bulb means here, this yellow light bulb. So if I were to click in here and remove that, oh, and I did that wrong. I had my submittal date in there. Oh, I can't spell either. And I can see that I have either submitted date or an SCR submittal date. So I want to remap that to my SCR submittal date. Now it tells me there's a match that I'm mapping it to, and everything will be fine when I import it in. It's not going to add this submittal date in there. It's going to actually remap it to this SCR submittal date. So codes and user-defined fields work the same throughout all of our levels here. Now, if I were to go to resources and I wanted to take a look at my resources, what I would do here is I can see that I have some resources that don't match. I don't have them in my P6. So what I can do in this case is I do have a light bulb telling me that I have something similar. So I could go and I could select that, and it's going to allow me to remap that to where I actually want it to go. Codes and UDFs are the same. We also have the ability to handle units of measure. So I can see that I have this M3, assuming that's square meters, but I don't have it in my defined, user defined, or used units of measure. I can go in and I can look here, and if I scroll down, I should have an M. Let me just type it in because I can search it too. I have M3 here, and it's still telling me that it's not an exact match, and that's because now my name doesn't match. So now what I've done is I am remapping this lowercase m3 to an uppercase m3 and actually giving it the name that we already have in our database to that particular unit of measure. So I can keep my units of measure from having multiple definitions or abbreviations for each one of those units of measure.
Yeah, which could really impact different reporting you have across the organization.
Absolutely.
So that's really key.
In the way of calendars. Now, when we handle calendars, it's going to show me all those global calendars that are coming in. Now, here I have my standard 5-day work week. Well, yep, we have that, but how do I know that the one that's coming in is actually the same, defined the same? So I might want to roll that down. And in fact, in most cases, I would say I want to roll all of these down just to make sure that I am not polluting up my current global calendar area. Now, I can also choose to roll down extra global calendars. So anything that's not defined here, if it comes in with a subsequent XER or XML, it's actually going to roll all those down as well for me without me having to do anything additional. I do have this area for project calendars. We had a client who wanted to be able to see what kind of project calendars were coming in with their from their contractors, because they had certain specifications for project calendars and what they should be defined as. So they wanted to be able to just see that here. So this is informational only. It's not going to remap anything or anything like that. It's already at the project level, so we don't have to worry about it. But this is for informational purposes. We can also handle our resource calendars. So if by chance I didn't have one that matched, I could certainly go in and I could remap it to a resource calendar that I had that matched that resource calendar as well. I can also, this is another thing that we added for one of our clients, is that this particular file doesn't have any notebook topics included in it, but they wanted to be able to either remap or to give it a new name so that it matched what they had in P6. And so they asked us to add this functionality in so that they could handle their notebook topics as well. Now, roles work very similarly to resources. And the one thing I didn't show you on resources, but is also available, is that we have this little option up here. This one is for roles, but we could do this for resources as well, is I can tell P6-Scrubber where I want to land those roles when they are imported. So if I have any other area that I wanted to put them in, let's say I want to put them in this SCR roles, I could check mark this, and it's going to import all of the roles here that are coming in underneath that resource or that role tree. And so that works the same as well with remapping my resources also. So I have that option here as well, where I can go and I can choose what parent I want to put those resources under. Now we can also handle cost accounts. You can verify that the cost accounts are there. You can decide whether you want to allow those to come in or whether you would like to scrub them out. Very similar to the rest of those modules on what we can do with the cost accounts as well. Now, another issue that could potentially happen is when you are importing a file, it already has a OBS or a responsible manager assigned to that particular file or that particular project. What you can do is you can actually change that responsible manager to one that is specifically for your organization. So it's not going to create a new OBS element. And then when it's imported in, it's automatically going to have that particular responsible manager already assigned to it. Now, the last thing here is what we call a simple scrub. Some organizations don't necessarily need to stick handle each one of their pieces of data. Maybe, for instance, they would like to just prefix it with something so that they know that when it comes in, where it came from. So you could choose to put a prefix in, and you can also choose a common separator to apply to each one of these. So I'm just going to put a dash here. Now on my activity codes, I have not only the option to not import them at all, but I could also choose to roll all of them down. So if I did that, it's going to take all my global activity codes and it's going to roll it down to the project level. The same goes for my calendars as well, is that I can roll those down and not have to define each one up in the global calendar area. I could just handle them all here. And then on these other ones, I do have the option to either prefix them or not to import them at all. For instance, one of our clients didn't want any resource shifts or curve information coming in. So we put that option here so that it could be removed from their XER files. Now, once I had everything set up, I could go in and I could save it. Now, I have the option to save at several different levels. So you can see I have this little world. That means that this is a definition that is available to all users who log into P6-Scrubber. Now I have these two little people here, which indicates that these are only available to a team. And a user has to be assigned to the team in order to save it or in order to use this definition. So if you had a particular group that handled your ABC contractor, you could just share it to that group or that team that uses that particular definition. And then, of course, the single person are going to be my personal ones, the ones that I created for myself. So when I go in to do a save as, it's going to ask me to name it. And I could put notes on it so that the notes are visible when I select it after it's saved. And then here's my option on what level I want to save it at. So in my team here, if I select that, then I can open it up and I can choose whatever team I've set up. And this is done at the administrator level for P6-Scrubber. Your administrator would set these up and assign the people to a team. Then I could just select that, and then it's going to save it to that team itself. In my case, I'm just going to make it a personal one. Now, if I have anything that I have not handled in my scrubber definition, it's going to come up and it's going to tell me that something was wrong. I didn't define something that I needed to. In my case, everything looked good, so it saved it successfully. And it's also told me what my definition is up here. So I have that my webinar sample is the definition that I have applied right now. Now, once I have a definition that is defined, it's saved, I can go in and and first of all, I'm going to blank out the definition. So I've come in here, I have no definition that is applied, but I just want to scrub the file. I've already set up the definition. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to select the definition that I want, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to load that definition. So that's going to tell P6-Scrubber that I want to use this definition to scrub whatever file I want to scrub. Then I can go into the option to scrub files, and I can choose the file I want to scrub. So I'm going to just grab this one. And if I wanted to do several at a time, let's say I got several in from the same contractor and I want to use the same definition, I could actually select more than one as well and open those. It's going to line them up, and then it's going to process them just in the order that they are, that they were in there. So I can see that it's working on it, and it's coming up, it's scrubbing my files for me. Now, once it's done, I have, first of all, an option to view the report. This is going to be a report that I can open, and I can see what exactly my scrubber definition did to my XER file. So at the top, this is kind of an overall kind of validation and telling you kind of what happened with each one of the items that I had selected. As I scroll down, I'm going to get some more detailed information here. So for example, in my project code type file, remember we had that district that we needed to remap that dictionary value to. It's telling me that that dictionary changed and that my DIST5 is now D5 and it was remapped. So it's going to give you a detailed accounting of what happened to each one of those. Here's my WBS cost performance one that was scrubbed out. And then in this particular definition, the submitted date actually got remapped to submitted date. So it's going to tell me each one of these and what happened with them. Here are my calendars that got rolled down. Now, if everything looks good with this, I can go ahead and I can download my clean file and import it. If it didn't look good, I would go back and I would adjust my definition so that it handled it the way that I wanted it to. Now, when I download the results, it's going to go and it's going to open up and download a zipped file. And you can see that I have two different files that came out. First of all, I have my clean XER, the one that I scrubbed, and I can tell that because it's appended with the date and the time. And I also have an HTML copy of that report that we just looked at a moment ago. So if I wanted to take that whole report and give feedback to whomever sent me the XER or the XML, I could share the whole report, or I could copy and paste just sections of the report and just let them know and give them feedback in that manner. So it gives me the opportunity to do that before I even import that into my P6 environment. Now, once I have that done, I can go in and, oh, what did I do? Oh, there it is. I can import it into my P6. So I've already imported a file from P6-Scrubber. And what we can see here is that I've got some indicators that come in that kind of tell me what happened with this file when it was scrubbed. I can see that I had a project ID validation, and I'll show you that in a minute. that was clean. I had some project types that were handled, and I had some dictionary values on my project codes that were handled. And there's my D5 that was handled. And then I also had a schedule status where I added a value there as well. Now I can also go into the activities screen. And the activity screen is going to show me activity by activity what happened with P6-Scrubber here. So on my vendor, everything looks really clean on my vendor. However, on my work type, it looks like I had some things that got deleted here because I said I didn't want that value to come in. I scrubbed it, and it's alerting me to that fact that I do have some blank values here now that I might want to look at. I've also got in my discipline, I've got some, and I don't have, I'm sorry, the discipline is not showing here. I guess I could add it really quick. Let me do that. This is an activity code. Bring in my discipline here. And it's showing me that I had some that were deleted that were not handled. And so I've got some problems when I imported it that I don't have those values now assigned with it. Some were deleted, some were not brought in at all. So it'll tell me what happened when that scrub occurred. Now another option I have is I've had a notebook that has been created. And that notebook is the same as my report that we looked at earlier. I have my my overall, and then I have my validations that are broken down as well. So you can keep track of those with the notebook as well as to what happened with that particular XER, and that it was handled by P6-Scrubber. So let's go back to P6-Scrubber and talk about just a few other things here. In my general area here, by default, P6-Scrubber will automatically include that notebook and those indicators in your file. Now, if perchance you are not wanting to do one or the other, let's say I don't want to see any indicators come in, I can simply turn this off, and it will not create those indicators when it scrubs the file. Another thing that I can do, that perhaps if I am someone who is sending a file out to someone else, and I know that they have a lower version than what my version is. Perhaps they are in version 19.12 and I'm in 21.12. I can actually change the version of that file so that it is a lower version. And so whomever I send that to would be able to still import it successfully into their P6 environment at that lower version. Now, another thing that I said I would visit is the validation on ID names, and that can happen either at the project level or the activity level. Now, when I enable this, what I can do is if I have standards that I have set out, let's say for a contractor, of how their project ID should look or what it should contain, I can define that here. So I can do things as simple as contains, starts with, ends with, but the most advantageous is going to be this simple pattern here. So let's say I want to have a project ID, or I'm expecting to see a project ID that has maybe a letter in it, and they need to be uppercase, and I believe it's 2 letters. I'm going to, so I know that I need to have 2 uppercase letters to begin with. Next, maybe I need 5 numbers. I'm looking for 5 digits. Then I expect to see a dash. So I'm going to do specific text, and say I want to see a dash. And then after that, I can have any character that, from then on, it could be anything. So I could put that it's an unlimited number. 0 is unlimited for any character. And then I could apply that. Now I have this little box over here that allows me to test it before I actually save it. So if I were to go in and select one of my example project IDs, I could put it in here and it would show me that, yes, what I have defined will actually work with what I'm expecting to see on my P6 project ID from a contractor, let's say. So we do have that ability for the project name as well. And we do have that ability for activity IDs and activity names. So just a few extra little things that we put in there. And of course, this was also by the request of a client. So one thing that we do kind of pride ourselves in is we listen to our clients, and we try to do things that are going to be the most helpful for them. So are there questions I need to answer before I hand it back to you, Nicole?
Nope, not right now, Sue. So
Okay, did I miss anything?
Do we want to touch on XMLs and Microsoft Project, just so people can
Absolutely.
get a feel
Sure.
for that? Okay.
Sure. So I'm going to go and I'm going to blank my definition again. Now, when I go, I'm just going to import these. When I go and I go to browse for a file, I have the option to take an XML file and use that. And I also have the option to take a Microsoft Project XML as well. So I'm just going to select my Microsoft Project XML and import it. Now, with Microsoft Project, they don't have quite the functionality that P6 does. So I am limited to what information that I'm going to be able to handle on an Microsoft Project XML. It's taking a little bit longer to import it because it is a different type of file than a regular XML from Primavera. And once it comes in, we're going to see that we don't have near the information that we did earlier. So on, like the XER or a Primavera XML. So as I go in, I'll see that there's really nothing at the global level because Microsoft Project doesn't provide anything at the global level. However, at the activity level, I do have some user-defined fields that came in, and I can see whether or not still, if they match or if they don't match, I can choose to remove them or keep them. And so I can handle those and bring them in a cleaner fashion. Like I said, there's just not a lot to handle in those. I do have the resources that I could deal with there. I could choose where to remap them to if I wanted to, and handle it that way as well. There aren't any codes or units of measure, nothing there. All of the project or all the calendars come in at the project level, so you're not going to have to worry about global calendars with a Microsoft Project file, and that's about it. Because
it could be
Microsoft,
UDFs, right?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
and that's the activity
Okay.
UDFs that we
Okay.
had here. That's where they're going to come
Okay.
in as. They're going to
Okay.
come in as
Perfect.
activity UDFs.
And are there resource UDFs? I just don't remember. I don't
No, there
use
are not.
that very often.
Oh,
Okay.
actually,
All right.
no, that's resource calendars, sorry. But no, they don't use resource UDFs either. Everything is going to come in at the activity level.
Okay.
So you can handle those as well, just to keep, to keep your data kind of tidy and all that. Even though there's not a lot to handle, you could still clean up those enough so that it didn't pollute up your database.
Okay. Now, if you're a contractor, you're not usually receiving files per se, could you still use Scrubber?
Absolutely. If you're sending out files, you might want to
Oh, yeah.
remove some of this information that's coming in. So
Okay.
let's say I didn't want to have they don't care what my resources are. I could choose to do a do not import on my resources. Where is that? Down here. And then it's going to take all of my resources out of that XCR. And so when I send it off, they don't have to deal with importing those resources in. Same thing
Okay.
with any of these pieces of information.
Okay. Okay. So if you're doing major resourcing and some costing in P6, but you don't have to share that with the owner because it's not in your contract, you can still use P6 and you won't have to do all this mucking about to remove everything before you send them the file.
Correct.
Okay. 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 Good. Perfect. I think that's probably good.
Okay, I'll hand it back to you then.
Okay, great. Okay, so thanks for the deep dive, Sue. Hopefully you got a feel for how the tool works, how flexible it is. We cover pretty much all the data, maybe a few elements that we can keep adding to the tool, but it's very, very functional and wide based. So, and easy to use. So you make the scrub definition, you save it, and then you can reuse it. So all those things Sue showed you, you don't necessarily have to do every single time as in depth. So she was trying to show you kind of the most complicated lead-in scenario that you probably have. And then you just reuse it, right? You just revet it. When you get a new file, you revet it. You make sure they haven't added things, because they could, right? Certainly you can have things added. And then you just run through those real quick each time and off you go. So it's, for us, our clients anyway, they've seen a lot of benefits that they're able to give feedback real quick on things that aren't quite the way they need to be. If you have certain things that you absolutely won't allow, you can either scrub them, or you might immediately turn around to the contractor and say, you've got to redo this. Okay, so depending on your situation, hopefully you saw that it's very easy to configure, and you can see that you've got the flagging of what was scrubbed, what was changed. So you've got that audit trail available to you, which is important. You need to be able to answer that you didn't change the schedule in doing the scrubbing or any importing. And the real key thing here is we're trying to keep P6 clean, because more and more of our clients are attaching P6 Reporter onto their P6 and then getting data out into things like Power BI and Tableau for corporate reporting. So that's becoming a big thing in the last year, maybe 2 years even. We've seen more and more companies want that sort of dashboarding out of P6. So you've got to keep it clean. You want codes to be consistent. That D5 versus District 5 that Sue showed you would make your reports not hold together properly. So it's important for that. So it saves a lot of time there on the accuracy of what you're getting out in the reports.